Hi there. Today, we're going to look at a story from Italy. It's a really good way for us to learn some new English words and understand something that's happening in the world. So, let's get started. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. Our story has four main parts. First up, we'll talk about protests happening in some big cities. Then we'll look at some trouble with the trains. After that, we'll see what the government did. And to finish, we'll try to understand why people were so unhappy in the first place. All right, let's jump right into our first section, protests in the cities. So what's going on? Well, this story is happening in Italy, in two cities called Milan and Turin. And, a lot of people there were really unhappy about something. So what happened? Well, in Italy, lots of people went out onto the streets. They gathered together. Why? They wanted to show that they were unhappy. This was happening in the cities where the Winter Olympic Games are being held. And that brings us to a great new word for us to learn, protest. So what does protest mean? A protest is basically when a bunch of people get together, they come together in a public place to show everyone they're not happy about something. They want to show they disagree. Okay, so in one city, Milan, things got a little tense. During the protest, some of the protesters and the police, they clashed. A clash is like a small fight or a strong disagreement. It means things got a bit violent between them. So, because of this clash, the police had to do something. And what they did in Milan was arrest 6 people. That means they took 6 people to the police station. Now, this protest in Milan, it wasn't the only one. Actually, a week earlier, there was another big protest, a really large one. But that one happened in a different city, a city called Turin. Okay, let's move on to the second part of our story now. It turns out, on the very same day as that protest in Milan, something else was going on. There was another really big problem, but this time it was with the trains. So yeah, in the northern part of Italy, the trains were having huge problems. We're talking serious issues. This meant that the trains were very, very late. A lot of people couldn't get to where they needed to go on time because the trains just stopped running. So you might be asking, why were the trains stopped? What was the problem? Well, officials think it was something called sabotage. And that's another good word for us to learn. What is sabotage? It's when someone breaks something on purpose. They do it to cause problems or to make something stop working. So what exactly happened? What kind of sabotage was it? Well, here's what they found. Someone started a fire right next to the train tracks, and they cut some really important electric cables. On top of that, the police even found a small explosive device close by. Okay, so we've got protests in the cities, and we've got big problems on the trains. A lot is happening, right? So what did the Italian government do about all this? Let's take a look at their response in our next section. Well, one government minister had something to say about all the trouble. He used a really strong word. He called some of the protesters criminals. And just so we're clear, a criminal is someone who breaks the law, someone who does something illegal. And the government didn't just talk, they also took action. Because of all these protests, they made a new law, a new security law, and they did it really quickly. So, what's this new law all about? Basically, it gives the police more power. Here's how it works. First, the police can now stop people if they think those people are going to cause trouble. Second, and this is a big one, they can do this before a protest even starts. And third, they're allowed to keep those people for up to 12 hours. Okay, so we've talked about what happened, but we haven't really talked about the biggest question yet. Why? Why were people protesting in the first place? What were they so unhappy about? Let's dive into that in our final section. It really comes down to 2 totally different ways of seeing things, especially about the Winter Olympics. Let's look at the 2 sides. On one side, you have the protesters. They're saying, hey, the Olympics cost way too much money. And they also think the games are hurting the mountains. But then, on the other side, you have the organizers. And they say the exact opposite. They say the Olympics don't cost anything and are actually good for the environment. So let's dig a little deeper into what the protesters are worried about. First, they see billions of dollars being spent on new roads, and they think that money should be going to help the mountains, not build roads. They also use this word sustainable. They say the games are not sustainable. What they mean by that is that the games are bad for nature, and they're also bad for the people and the communities who live in that area. So there you have it. We've looked at the protests, the problems with the trains, and the 2 very different opinions about the Olympics. It really makes you think, doesn't it? It leaves us with this big question. When you have a huge event like this and people disagree so strongly, what's the best way to find a solution that works for everybody?